Bill, thank you for joining us. You have been a staunch advocate for holding the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin accountable for many years, dating back to the days when Sergei Magnitsky was killed by the Kremlin. And you said something very curious over the weekend. What you said was that the conflict between Israel and Gaza is cover for Vladimir Putin. And what you were saying, I think, was that this is something that makes him very happy because the eyes of the world aren't focused on him. Tell us more about what you were thinking.
So the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel started on the 7th of October. And for anybody who's following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, you'll notice that for the first, 2.5, 3 weeks, there wasn't a single article about Putin's crimes in Ukraine. And you're starting to see little bits and dribs and drabs of news coming out of Ukraine, but it's nothing like it was before because 95% of the world's attention, the media attention, is now focused on the Middle East. And this is a huge win for Putin. And furthermore, we're now in a situation where in the last run-up to the government budget being approved, the government almost went into sort of shutdown, financial shutdown, because of some right-wing Republicans who said that they wouldn't approve the budget if Ukraine was included. And so you've now got a situation where there's grumbling, at least from some quarters inside the U.S. political establishment, about funding Ukraine. You now have another military conflict which requires funding, and that all plays right into Putin's hands because he can't beat Ukraine on the battlefield, and so his big bet is hopefully to beat Ukraine by us no longer supplying Ukraine with military support and with financial support. And so as I look at this whole thing, I say to myself, this conflict, this invasion by Hamas of Israel and the subsequent retaliation by Israel is just a dream for Vladimir Putin. And of course, I didn't mention the fact that for at least some period of time, oil prices rose because of the uncertainty about oil supplies from the Middle East. And so this is just a win-win-win for Vladimir Putin.
So this is a very scary thing. And you're, from my perspective, exactly right about this because I've been working on this with the Ukrainians for a while, asking, why aren't you being more vocal? Why aren't you speaking out? And I'm thinking maybe they were thinking they had this in the bag, but as you say, Bill, this is a very dangerous situation, not just for Ukraine right now, but for the rest of Europe and the rest of the world. Can you tell us what your thoughts are about how this, I suppose, this lull in reporting on what's happening in Ukraine is going to hit us down the road, because it's not just for a short term here, I think.
Well, for sure, what this lull of reporting does is, first of all, allows Russia to get away with more atrocities. So, I mean, the number of people killed in Mariupol, the number of children, women, civilians killed in Mariupol at the beginning of the war dwarfs anything that ever happened in pretty much any conflict. I mean, the numbers are off the charts. They're in the hundreds of thousands, and every day there are bombs being sent off by Russia to civilian parts of Ukraine, killing civilians, and they're not being reported on anymore. And so after a while, the outrage of what's going on, what the Russians are doing, is going to lessen. Not because it's less outrageous, but because less people are going to know about what's going on because the attention is focused elsewhere. And by the way, it's not just the situation with Russia and Ukraine. Any dictator that wants to do anything bad right now is going to be able to get away with it because there's only limited bandwidth in America and Europe and other places. The American people just can't think about all the different things that are going on. And so, for example, while all this stuff has been happening, and even before it was happening, the Azerbaijanis basically grabbed a part of Armenia that the Armenians thought as their territory. And I bet you if I were to survey 100 people, 5 people would tell 100 educated people, 5 people could tell me the story about what actually happened. And 95% of smart people would probably say, I'm sorry, Bill, I don't know what you're talking about, because people just don't have the capacity to process all this information. And so you're going to see lots and lots of people doing stuff because they've got the cover of 95% of the press attention being focused on justifiably focused on a horrific situation that Hamas has unleashed on Israel. But be that as it may, it's a big benefit and a gift to all sorts of bad guys around the world.
And this is the information war that you've been talking about, and many have been talking about for a long time, that's facilitated this. And as you look at what's going on inside Russia, there was a time, maybe a year or so ago, that people were thinking Vladimir Putin might be in trouble in terms of what he was doing inside of Russia, you know, with Vladimir Kara-Murza, Alexei Navalny, and many others. But it seems as though with this distraction and the commitment that he and his people have made to this kind of activity for long time activities, that they may actually have strengthened their hand because of this. Am I wrong in that thinking?
So Vladimir Putin has one fundamental difference from almost every other world leader, which is that he doesn't care how many of his own people die for his own military and political adventures. And so according to the Ukrainian estimates, more than 300,000 Russian soldiers are dead because of what Vladimir Putin has thrown them into, dead from the meat grinder. And that would have stopped any normal head of state a long time ago, many tens of thousands of deaths ago, because most countries can't tolerate it. But he has a different set of morals, different set of standards. He's effectively a psychopath with no empathy. And so for him, he can carry on doing this. And his big calculation is that all he has to do is outlast us. You know, we have a really low tolerance for death and economic pain and so on. And he's got an unbelievably high tolerance for that. And he's hoping that we will fold before he does. It's like a very high stakes game of poker where a lot of dead people are going to be collateral for his poker playing. And there have been a few moments when he's been on the ropes. Remember in June of this year, I should say, when Yevgeny Prigozhin was marching on Moscow, and no one knew what to do. Everyone was like saying, well, is Prigozhin going to become the new boss, or is Putin the boss? And nobody was like taking sides, because they don't really care. All they just want to do is make sure that they're reporting to the most vicious boss and loyal to that boss and not anybody else. And that was a good example, not necessarily an example of a democratic uprising, but an example of people being tired and unhappy with Putin.
So what, Bill, is the best way to turn this around? Or is there a way to do that?
Well, I mean, the one thing you can say for sure is that Russia is suffering dramatically. They're suffering in terms of loss of life. They're suffering in terms of loss of military equipment. They've had to go to the North Koreans begging to get artillery and other bullets and so on. They've gone to begging to the Iranians. The economy is in a desperate place. And so if we were to carry on supporting Ukraine, and by the way, giving the Ukrainians the tools and the equipment to win, the Ukrainians can win this. I mean, just giving them ATACMS missiles basically puts Crimea in the firing line. There's all sorts of support that we could continue to give Ukraine, which we should continue to give Ukraine. And all the people grumbling about how much money it's going to cost, it's less than 5% of the US defense budget to basically destroy our second worst adversary, to totally take them out of commission, to destroy their ability to make war without a single loss of an American life. That seems to be a pretty good deal to me.
The assassinations that the Kremlin's been involved in, and you've been on that list for a long time. You said last year that it seemed like there was an uptick. What do you think now?
Well, I think that there's a lot of people being poisoned all over Europe. We've seen a bunch of opposition members, Russian opposition members, poisoned in places like Prague and Berlin. We've definitely seen much heightened activity of Putin and all of his guys in terms of espionage, in terms of probing, in terms of basically going after their enemies, both inside Russia and outside of Russia. And in a certain way, the more isolated Putin becomes, the more dangerous he becomes, because he just doesn't care. I mean, there was a time when he actually cared about what people in the West thought. The more he's becoming an outlier, a pariah, the more dangerous he becomes, and it becomes more dangerous for people like me.
Bill, thank you. Thanks to you and your team. And we appreciate you taking time to talk to us about this today.
Thank you.